Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Moodle and TML webinar series. Today, we are going to be talking about assessments. As you know, I'm Megan Price, and I'm the Director of Innovation here at AliveTech.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Stevens, and I'm the Director of Client Services at AliveTech. Today's webinar is approximately 1 hour. Feel free to ask your questions as needed. You can raise your hand or to speak. There will be a Q&A session after each section. But you don't have to wait for the Q&A, just raise your hand and we'll get to you.
So this month, we're going to be focusing on assessment. This first webinar is going to be the introduction to assessments and getting assessments on Moodle. And then our next one will be more advanced tips for creating those quizzes.
As with all of our webinars, they will be posted to our YouTube channel, and you can get to that by going to the support site and then clicking YouTube videos up at the top. And we also post solutions within the support page that also links the slides from the webinars as well.
So in this session, we're going to be looking at the best practices for creating assessments before you go to add it to Moodle. Then we'll look at how you can import those questions easily from a Word document that you already have into Moodle, and then managing the quiz settings once you're creating the final quiz inside of the Moodle course. Before we get really into giving those assessments, it's more important for us to know why we're doing this. Why do we assess? So for IUOE, I know one of the big reasons is for industry certification, right? You have to have those certifications in order to be actively working with certain machinery or within certain fields. So having those assessments does help with determining whether or not someone can operate a machine or fill a certain role. But as the instructor, assessments can be used for several other important pieces for you. Okay, the first would be to measure the students' learning as the course is happening. So you can look at what areas are their strengths and weaknesses, what content you need to focus more on. And it actually can help guide your instruction. So if you come upon a content piece that's a little bit difficult, you can utilize the feedback from your class to add or change the way you're delivering the content to hopefully make sure that they understand it moving forward. Now, understanding when to assess is also important. And there are two different types of assessments that you can do. The first type is a formative assessment, and those are going to be types of assessments that occur during the class. And they might not look like a normal test. It could just be conversations and discussions in your class. It could be activities that you're asking them to do or homework assignments, things that you can see what they have learned so far. They can apply it and you can assess how well they're grasping concepts, or even those small quizzes you might have in between topics that'll let you know whether or not that topic is mastered. Summative tests are going to be your final exams or your final tests, things that you would have at the end of the entire course. So this could be a final test in Moodle or the international exams that would be after all of your coursework is completed. It'll give you an overall view of what the student has mastered. When you start trying to make an assessment, it's important to think about how you write your questions, because how you write your questions can actually impact the results you have. If you write your questions in an unclear way, you might not quite evaluate the student's understanding as well as you would expect to. So there are 5 things you can look at to help you with choosing the best type of question and writing the question as best as you can. So I'm going to go through each one of these and show an example of a good question versus a bad, and kind of talk to you a little bit about each type. First thing is making sure that your questions are very clear. Okay, they should be clearly worded and not ambiguous. Okay, so if we look at that first question, we see What is the primary purpose of a pressure relief valve in a boiler system? And that is a very clear question. There might be more than one purpose, right? They might have more than one function, but if we're asking for the primary purpose, it gives the learner an exact question that they have to answer. If you were to just say, explain the purpose, well, this is a really broad and vague question. It makes it a little unclear what type of valve you're referring to. So having the specific type is really helpful because it'll help your students focus on what it is that they're trying to answer. You should also make sure that the questions you ask align with the learning objectives of your course. So the actual content of your course, making sure that this is what they're supposed to walk away with. So if you had a course on cranes, okay, asking how do you determine the load capacity of a hoisting crane, that question is relevant to the topic. If you were to ask, describe the history of a steam engine, while this is still interesting information, it's not directly relevant to what they need to know for this course. So it's a good filler question. However, it really doesn't test what they need to know in order to pass the course. Including a variety of questions is also really helpful. So in this first question, it's a multiple choice question, meaning they can pick more than one answer when they're going through it. This is a really great way of doing those all of the above questions without making it so obvious that they have to click all of them. They have to think a little bit more than they do in a question like a multiple choice question. So this would be something called a multiple select. The bottom one is a true or false question, and true or false questions get the job done, right? It's a true or false situation. However, they have a 50% chance of getting the answer right and 50% chance of getting it wrong. So there's a very good chance that they got it right just by checking the box. It's not a very deep thought type of question. It's a little bit on the simplistic side. Now, having those isn't necessarily bad, but if your entire test is made up of true or false, you can almost guarantee everyone will get at least 50% of those right if they were just to pick true every single time that they answer a question. So it's not the best representation of learned knowledge. Choosing the appropriate difficulty is also important. The question should challenge the students to think through the concepts, but also should be achievable. So an example of a good version of this would be list the steps required to safely shut down a high pressure steam boiler. Well, they should know the steps. So that is a very clear question. It's achievable, but they do have to know something about them in order to answer that question correctly. If you were to ask, explain the thermodynamic principles behind every component of a steam boiler, well, there are plenty of components, and is it important that they know the thermodynamic principles behind each one? Probably not. Knowing their function would be important, but knowing how it works thermodynamically might not be the correct question, depending on the level of course. If it's an introductory course, that question is a little too difficult. And finally, questions should have the opportunity for meaningful feedback. Now, if you're grading the test yourself, you understand, you might want to give some feedback to your student. If you're doing it through Moodle, you can pre-write some feedback if you would like to. But what's important is making sure that you're able to provide feedback. Make sure that there's an actual answer to the question. So in this case, we have identify and explain the differences versus which pump is better. Which pump is better is a subjective question. It doesn't really provide a clear basis for the feedback or look at specific knowledge. There is no one correct answer. Maybe it depends on a situation. So you want to make sure your answers and your questions are very clear and concise, and that the questions make sense and have a correct answer that you can respond to and explain why their answer is incorrect. All right, so along with the characteristics of a good question, it's also important to think about the distractors that you use. A distractor is an answer choice that's incorrect, but can confuse or distract the learner if they don't know the content as well as they should. Okay, so these are your wrong answers that might make them think a little bit. They should make the learner think a little bit about which one is correct. So we're going to look at this one question. Okay, what is the proper procedure for restarting a steam boiler after a low water condition shutoff? And there are 4 answer choices. We're going to go through each answer and talk about whether or not it's a good option. Okay, so I'm going to tell you now the correct answer is C, but we're going to go through each option and discuss why. So if we look at answer number A, it says call a technician to check the boiler for you. This distractor is not a very plausible answer, right? It's less plausible because as an operating engineer, it's expected for you to be able to handle a basic restart procedure. So this answer might be an easy one for your students to check off because it's too wrong. It's not plausible enough. If we look at option B, checking the building's HVAC system for other issues, that doesn't relate at all to restarting a steam boiler. So this answer is not a great distractor because there's a good chance everyone would know, or most people would know, that that can't be correct, right? It's not relevant to the question at hand. When you're writing test questions, making sure that all the answer choices are about the same length is pretty important because what tends to happen is the correct answer will be really long and descriptive, and all of the wrong answers will be really short. So you'll have one that's quite long and a bunch of short answers. And I don't know about you, but if I was to take this test, I would automatically pick C because it's the longest answer. It sticks out. And I might not even read the question. So making sure that all of your answer choices are roughly the same length will make your question a more thought-provoking question. And the last one, answer D, isn't quite right, but it does provide some clues that you're close to the right answer. So it's similar to answer number C, and it's hinting that that's on the right track. This kind of helps lead them to the right answer. So these are some examples of what I would suggest you don't use, just because it makes the question a little bit too simplistic. You're not really testing how well they know it. You're more testing their ability to take a test. So this is the question again with different filler answers, different distractors. So the correct answer is still C, and I just replaced each of the previous ones with a better version of what it was. Something that's a little bit closer in length. So now the length of them are uniform. The first one I changed from calling someone else to look at it to doing a full inspection of the boiler and refilling and restarting according to the safety. So it's similar, but you wouldn't need to inspect the entire boiler for this kind of question. B, it kind of goes through checking the fuel supply check and the water gauge, so it's kind of close. And then the last one is I have bypass and monitor the gauges. So all of the answers sound pretty correct. They all sound like they could be feasible answer choices. And so it's going to cause your student to think through the process a little bit more in depth.
Okay, great. So you're an instructor and you have a Moodle course, and maybe you download a Word document from the TML and you would like to take that from paper to then online. So I'm going to just go over that process. I have a sample document with some questions in it. Could very well be similar to a format of something that you might download from the TML. So how do I get this to be imported to Moodle. What I do not recommend, especially for multiple choice or true or false questions, is for you to copy the question and paste it. Copy a choice and then paste it. That's very tedious and it's going to take a lot more time. The quickest way, especially for multiple choice and true or false, is to format it to import it. And what that is we put this document in a specific format, we save it as a text file, and then we upload it into Moodle. So I'm going to show you the Aiken format. Here we can see I've identified that we have some multiple choice questions, some true, false. The Aiken format is for these types of questions. There is another format if you have short answer, fill in the blank, those kind of questions, a little more complicated. But for today, we'll do this format, and in the next session in 2 weeks, we'll do the gift format. So I have identified my correct answers, I have my questions, and I have my choices. The Aiken format is you do not number the questions, you just have the question text. You have a capital letter, a period, a space, and your choice. The next capital letter, period, space, choice. And at the bottom, you have the word answer, a colon, a space, and then the letter. I'm going to show that in practice here. I took out the one. Going to then now I already have a capital letter here. That's great. I have a period, I have space, and I have my choice. Now for a correct answer, I'm going to change this to answer. And I'm going to take everything else out. Go to the next one. And don't worry, I'm not going to do this whole document. I'm only going to do 2. And then we're going to import it. I would also recommend that if you are doing this right into Word, you could also copy this document, put it in something like Notepad or a similar kind of text editor. But if you're going to be updating your original Word document, I would make a copy first, because you might want to go back and then format that original Word document maybe for an in-person session. So always save and make a copy. So here I have 2 questions, A, B, C, D. My answer here is C. My answer here is B. And then I have the rest of the document formatted in this format. So note again, no numbering of the questions. The choices are capital letter, period, space, then your choice. And then to indicate the correct answer, it is answer, colon, space, letter.
Cassandra, does answer have to be capitalized?
The documentation that I have read puts it in all capital letters. I have actually not tested it in lowercase letters. Because the documentation has capital letters, I automatically just use capital letters, but that is a great question and I can test that. And I can put that on the support portal where I outline the steps to format something in Aiken. So if you ask that question, I will have that answer tomorrow. So I could save this as my Word doc. So I can save it like that. However, Word documents with a .doc or .docx does not upload, does not import into Moodle. It needs it to be a text file. So I could, again, copy this, throw it in Notepad and save it. That way it's automatically a text file, but we can just keep it here and save as using the dropdown. We can locate plain text .txt text. Always remember where you save your files as well. Now we are going to head over to Moodle. Okay, we are in our Moodle course. Just a sample course, and now we want to import this quiz. note that I'm starting with the questions and importing the questions. We need the questions to be in Moodle before we can assign them to a quiz. So I could go ahead and make my quiz shell now, but I don't have any questions to add to it. So I'm going to just save that step for when I have my questions ready. So under the course title, you have this course administration menu. Using the More dropdown, the first choice is Question Bank. Now from here, doesn't look like I can do much as far as importing. I don't see the word import, and if you've been in Moodle, the button is usually what the action is. So use the drop down to the left. We have export, import, and categories. Just like your Moodle courses, Moodle wants to put little items in a bigger item. So courses, you identify a category. It could be your local, it could be first year of or the year of your apprentice, it could be by season. It's the same with quiz questions. They want you to put your quiz questions somewhere. And that's really helpful as well. Because if you're trying to target the question set in a particular quiz, you don't want to have to scroll through 50 or 100 and something different questions just to find that 10 set. So put it in a category. So I'm going to go ahead and just identify a category now. You can have a category inside your text file, but I just set it up now. I'm just going to call these webinar 4. It needs a name, and you know that it needs a name because it is indicated by the required symbol. Now the category info, no required symbol. So I don't need to put anything here, but you can certainly add more detail. And then just add category. Now I have a place to put it. Going back to that drop down, I'm going to import. And now you can see there are certainly other formats besides Aiken and Gift. These are probably the easiest. Some of these get pretty complicated because it does have code in it, like the Moodle XML format. So I'm going to select Aiken. And under General, if it's not automatically expanded, make sure you expand it because this is where we pick our category. And if you don't select a category, the system will select a category for you, and that may not be where you wanted your quiz questions to go. So I'm going to select webinar 4, and then I'm going to unselect get category from file because we didn't put the category in the file. And we do want a stop on error. So I'm going to drag and drop my file here. One thing I forgot to mention is if you do see the little question mark, you can click it and it will show you the format. So it gives you a brief description. If you click more help, you then, it doesn't open up in a window. You then go to Moodle and you can see exactly what the format is. I'm going to drag and drop my file. I could use the picker and navigate to my file. However, I prefer to drag and drop it because it's easier. Going to import. There were 6 questions in my file and 6 questions imported. Now, if one of these questions maybe weren't or didn't import correctly, then it will show red and it will tell you that it did not import that question. Now you're given information about your bank. This is where you can do more actions. You can see what type of question it is, and that's indicated here by the icon. You can see your question. You can edit your questions from here, or you can wait until you can edit your questions directly within the quiz. If you have draft questions that you're working on, you can change it from draft to ready, and then these will not be selected. one thing that where I definitely would pay attention to this setting is if I had webinar 4 and I had 50 questions in it, so I had a large pool, and then I assigned that pool to a quiz, everything that says ready in that pool is going to be in the pool that's delivered to the student. So if I say pick 5 and it was picking the 5 questions I was working on, they're going to get incomplete questions. So do set it to draft if you're still working on it or you want to come back to a question. Or if that question is not performing well, maybe you want to, okay, let me put it to draft. No one else is going to be affected. And then at a later date, I'll come back and look at it. Anytime a question is changed, you will see the version change. So right now, these are all version 1. And then you can see the who created it. If there's any comments. And then this quiz has not been taken by a student. So there's no data under needs checking at this time, but it will give you some stats. Especially if you have a large group taking a quiz, after the quiz is closed, come back here and you can kind of see how your questions are performing. So if every student in your class got a particular question wrong, it's going to indicate it here. Maybe the distractors are too distracting. Maybe, you know what, I got that question from a publisher, but we don't cover it in our course. Maybe it just wasn't covered. Maybe something's worded, or maybe there's a typo. So it's definitely worth coming back, especially if you get complaints that students are getting a particular question incorrect. There's all sorts of others over here. And to learn more information, you can click the little question mark. One thing to know about usage, if you have a question that is across multiple quizzes or multiple versions of a quiz, you'll see this usage number here. These haven't been assigned to a quiz yet, so that's why it says 0. And when the question was last used, and then of course, who modified it. Now I do have this bank here that I had just uploaded, and I could just jump and go create my quiz now, but I wanted to note one more feature, and that is export. So I have my question bank, and my quiz has been performing for a while, but it's time to give it a new look and feel or a refresh of questions. Or maybe I do want to swap out some of those underperforming questions. I can export out this category, this entire category, into a format that I can then edit offline, and without having to format it again, as long as I don't deviate from the format I'm about to download, I can just import it directly back into Moodle. Okay, and if you click questions, you see all the questions for that particular category. You can deselect it and then choose a different one. Final test has 27. So you can also use the filters up here. Now, I mentioned that ACAN format is for multiple choice and multiple true or false. If you have a short answer or fill in the blank, you could use another format, or you can just add it directly into your question bank. There's a lot of options here, and we'll go through that, but we're going to do it at the quiz level. It's the same process. You select your question type and then add your details. I will say true, false, multiple select, and multiple choice are all auto graded. And then the number ones as well. They are auto graded by Moodle. If you choose short answer, if a letter deviates, if a word placement deviates from your the correct answer that you've identified, it will mark that student incorrect, and it can be a little frustrating where they just said it a different way, but it's kind of strict. So sometimes, especially if it's a multi-word short answer, it's hard to predict all of the different ways and spellings that someone may enter their answer, and it could cause them to be frustrated or to contact you to have you manually grade it. any questions on the question bank before we go into actually creating a quiz? Okay. So this is the question bank, but I got to get back to the course where I can actually add my quiz. So I'm going to pop back over to the course, and the course is just your content. This is what the student sees. You may see more if there are hidden things, like we hide instructor notes, obviously. And then the pink icon is going to be your quizzes. So we're going to create a new quiz, but to edit a course, I have to enable edit mode. At the top right, click edit mode. And now you can see the interface changes. Now I have a lot more buttons to choose from. Let's just say I'm going to add a new quiz in session 1. Click add an activity or resource. And we are adding an activity. You could use all, if you don't see it on the list, you can also filter to just jump right to activities, and it is here. One thing about Moodle is they try to clump similar activities or resources by color. So you can see that maybe something that's graded is pink. So a workshop can be graded because it's a peer-reviewed activity, a quiz, an assignment. And then more collaborative tools are orange, chat, choice, feedback, all that. So we are going to quiz. Now every quiz needs a name. We have to call it something. So let's call this one Webinar 4, since that is our category. We can give a description. What I like to put here is I like to give them upfront information about it. Once they click the quiz title, they are given information, what's the passing, when's it open, and things like how many attempts you have, that information. But I also want to just give it to them on the course page so they can kind of see. So here I can put passing score. You know, we have 6 questions, so I'll do 4 out of 6, which is, I don't know if it's 80%, I'm not a math genius, but we'll just put the percentage next to it. And you will have unlimited attempts. Now I also have a choice here. If you do want it to display on the course page without them having to click, then be sure that you do click the checkbox here to enable display on the course page. And now we have a lot of settings to go through. The quizzes are probably the most difficult thing to set up because there's so many options. So we're going to start with timing. So when do you want to open the quiz? When do you want to close the quiz? If you have your members take the stationary international exams, those open at specific dates, close on specific dates, and they are timed, and it is 1 attempt. But maybe you have a course that people come in and out of throughout the year. If you do just keep a course open year round, you can't enable these dates. So I would keep them disabled. But if you did want to enable them, you choose the drop down. It is in military time. So if you want it to open at midnight, then it is 00. And then if you want it to close at the last moment of the day, it's 23:59. You can also determine what if someone's in the middle of a quiz and time's up? What happens? You can automatically just stop them and submit, or you can have a little bit of a grace period, or you can say, don't count it if you want to be strict. You would need to then make sure that you do put minutes here in the time limit. If it is a huge exam, 200 questions, let's say, maybe you want to give them an hour or 2. So you can also pick hours and some other options here. I definitely would not use seconds. Moving down to grade. Grade category, if you did set up your grade book with different categories. So looking at the list here, many of you probably have the ELDT course that was shared by Job Corps with all those videos. That grade book does have categories because the different categories need to total something different. So you would see the theory section, units 1 through 5, is in a separate category. And then if you have the hazmat endorsement, that's in a different category. So you would identify a different category here that was already identified. But your course doesn't have to have categories. This is a short course. There are no categories. We grade everything the same. Now your grade to pass. This you can only we're gonna set, let's see, we have 6 questions, so we're gonna put a 6 here. Oh no, we said 4. So it is the number, it's not a percentage, it's the actual point value. Attempts allowed, by default, unlimited is going to be selected, but you can indicate anything from 1 through 10 or unlimited. Grading method. So if you do have unlimited attempts, do you want to log their highest attempt, their average grade, their first attempt, or last attempt? Obviously, this doesn't matter much if you only have 1 attempt because that's the attempt that's going to be recorded. By default, it's highest grade because that's the most common choice. And again, if you have questions or want to dig in further to these settings, if you see the question mark, it will give you more information and allow you to go to the Moodle forums. Or you can fill out a support ticket by clicking support anywhere on the site, and we're happy to dig into that with you. Now, layout. This is really going to depend on your preference. So if it is a short quiz, then it's not that painful to have to click next to get to the next question after every question. And that would be here. So new page, every question. If it is a 50 question quiz, that might be a little bit more painful to have to click next 50 times. I kind of, as a learner, would just rather scroll and read. And that way it's a little bit easier to go revisit something because a question towards the end might trigger something in my brain to then go back. Oh, I think I answered that incorrectly, and then go back. So I prefer never all questions on one page, but you certainly have choices for your preference. Navigation. This, when it's free by default is they can go out of order. So they can start question 1, they can click question 50 if they want and start there, or sequential. Do you really want to make sure that they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on? Now, question behavior, shuffle within questions is different than shuffle questions. So please note that. And one recommendation that Megan gave was do a multiple select instead of all the above. And this is where that is really handy, because if you do have a choice that says none of the above or all of the above or A and B only or B and C only, and you have this marked as yes, everything's going to be jumbled and it's going to be very confusing for your end learner. So if we don't recommend all the above, we recommend a multiple select, but if you did have those type of questions, you definitely want to choose no. But we don't have those questions, so we're choosing yes. Also, shuffling within questions, if you do have them taking an online course or online quiz in an in-person setting, and they're sitting really close together, this also can help mitigate cheating. So if every person would have their own version or copy of the course, because the questions are going to be shuffled, we're going to indicate that. And now the choices within the question are going to be shuffled. So the chances that person 1 sitting next to person 2 have the exact same quiz, pretty low. And now, how do you want to give feedback? So how do the questions behave here? We have a lot of different ways we can give feedback. Deferred is after. So you give the feedback after they have made their selection and submitted the quiz. Each attempt builds on the last. By default, this is no. And then it's just exactly what it says. Each attempt is building to get them a higher score. Review options. These are a lot of choices. One thing that you can immediately cross off is if your quiz is open year-round, you don't have to worry about this setting at all. You will want to do immediately after the attempt, because that's when they want their feedback. They want to know what they scored. During the attempt, you could show them the correct answer during the attempt. We don't recommend it. Maximum points here. They have to submit it for them to get the feedback. Later, while the quiz is open, is here, and we're not going to close our quiz, so we can just deselect all those. Now there's a lot of choices. So do you want to allow them to review their attempt? And what that means is after they submit, they will have the ability or functionality to click a button or link, and then they can actually see how they scored on every question. They can see if something was marked partially correct, if something was marked correct or incorrect. And at that time, they could go back and flag their questions. And what a flag is they're telling you, hey, there's something wrong with this question, or I feel like there's something wrong with this question, because a lot of times they flag things because they thought they were marked incorrectly, but they were marked correctly. So I will show you what it is like for that student who flags, and then what it's like for you when you also review whether something was correct. So if this is deselected, they can review their attempt, but they won't know if the choice or if their answer was correct or not. If you choose to show maximum points or the points that they earned. So maximum points is the total points you could have earned for this. So if you have a multiple select, maybe you want to give partial credit if they got 2 out of 3. So to know that, it would be helpful because they could see, oh, I scored a 2 on a 3-point question. I must have gotten partial credit. Specific feedback, general feedback, overall feedback. There are many places that you can indicate feedback, and we'll go over a couple of those. And then right answer. So whether correct does not give them the right answer if they got it wrong, unless this is checked. It could say, it will just show an X and say, so-and-so got this one wrong. But if right answer is selected, they'll show them with the little check mark which one was right. And that would all be up to your preference as you hold the quiz. Appearance. Honestly, we don't do much with this. Do you want to show the user's picture? Most of the users don't have pictures. How many places? In the decimal, by default, it's 2. We generally keep it there. But if you have any questions on these settings, you can reach out or click the help. Safe exam browser. When set up, this would prevent the user from opening up a new browser during a quiz session. This comes with Moodle. There is another service that a different local who is not in attendance uses, and that's called Lockdown Browser. So that is different than Safe Exam Browser. And this does require some configuring. So if this is something you're interested in, we're happy to walk you through it. Or you can click the question mark. Extra restrictions on attempts. So you could, not really proctoring, but in NetLane, you could require a password. So maybe you have a quiz open year-round, but you only give that password out at certain times of the year. Or maybe you just want a password because you don't want someone else taking it for them. If you just want a password on your exam, they would click the exam, they would enter the password, and then they would be able to take the quiz. Overall feedback. This is the feedback after they click submit. They are shown a screen and it will give overall feedback. So you could say, you passed the course or quiz, and give some uplifting feedback, say congratulations. If they did not pass, you could say something like, please review section 4 for more detail. Grade boundary, this would be the grade at which they have failed. And of course, 100% they have passed. Common module settings, we don't do much with this either, but I would show here groups. So you could have this quiz, but for separate groups. You would have to set up those groups ahead of time, but this is the section to do it. And now restrictions and completions. Restrict access, what does that mean? That is you limiting who can take this. And a common restriction is they have to actually click the content within this module in order to view this. Or it could be based on a grade from a prior quiz. So if they failed quiz 1 and now quiz 2 is coming around, they haven't demonstrated that they've mastered quiz 1 content. So I don't think they're ready for quiz 2. So maybe you want to specify that they had to have a passing grade, or maybe you do want to specify a date, but I would really just do date up in the open and close. We're going to do activity completion, and then we're going to say they had to have looked at session 1 presentation. Session 1 presentation must be marked complete. Now, if I wanted to pop this quiz and not let them see it before they have access to it, I can click the little eyeball. And this goes on any restrict access section of any activity. If you don't want them to see even the grayed out version, the kind that's not clickable because it's not available yet, this just takes the whole activity from their site. And then once they have satisfied the restrictions to be released, then boop, it's there on the course page. I wouldn't really do that for a quiz though. And now completion conditions. What's it take for them to pass? Well, we can do, base it off the grade book. We've already identified a passing grade, but maybe you want to take it a bit further. We can add some requirements. View this activity. I do not suggest this setting. This means they click it, they view it, and they're done. They can move on with their life. They don't actually have to take it. More often, we do receive a grade. You could, if you're just trying to capture maybe pre-knowledge, so maybe before they've gotten the content, how about they just receive any grade? Because they haven't learned the lessons yet. I just want to gauge what they know. So they might not pass, but we still, if they've completed it, we want to mark this as complete. But more often, you're probably going to use passing grade. Now, you'll notice that these are checkboxes because you can select multiple items. And so why wouldn't I make them view it and then make them also receive a grade? It's redundant. And the more settings you put on something, the more opportunity for future upgrades of Moodle to change something and maybe it's not going to work the same. So I just deselect view the activity. What I would select view the activity on is something like a PDF. We want them to view it. You can't do anything else with it, but please check out my PDF. So this all looks good. And I'm going to click save and return to course. Now I have my shell here, but I don't have any questions in it. And you can tell that you don't have any questions in it because it says no questions have been added. We're coming up to 6 minutes, so get your questions in if you have any questions for me, and I will try to go through this. We also have similar steps on the support portal, and I'm happy to walk anyone through setting up a quiz over Zoom, or if you have a Word file, please just send it to us. We can format it and import it for you. It's no problem. We're quite quick. So here I'm going to add questions. And now I'm going to add questions from my question bank. So this tiny little add over here to the right, I'm going to add from question bank. I'm going to select my question bank. And you'll know it's a good question bank because there will be a number. Apply the filter. Select all my questions. At this time is when you can deselect a question. And click add. Now here, it default has a 1 point for everything. And let's say you have a 50 question quiz, but you want to make it out of 100. Unfortunately, you have to update that point value in every single question. It's not a select all, despite it being a feature request of the Moodle forums. They haven't gotten to that one yet. So you would have to do this manually and make sure you hit enter as you go. Now, this is using all the questions in my pool. If I wanted to add a select number of questions from a larger pool, then we can go to random question, find my category. I'll just go to final, and then I'm going to select some questions from here. And now you can see, now this is truly random. So you don't know the order and you don't know what position any question is going to be or what's going to be selected. It is random. But if you wanted to check out all the questions that are in this pool, you can click see questions. To move questions around, maybe you don't like the placement of some of these. It does not matter to move around the random questions. It's not going to do anything. So it's only when you definitely are selecting certain questions. And then up here, because I added additional questions here, we have, and I changed the point value of number 1 to 2 points. We have 10 points total, and then a maximum grade of 10, because they can't earn more than 10. And we can shuffle. So if you want to shuffle the question order, that's where you go to shuffle. I'm going to save this, but in adding this and tweaking it, that is not my grade to pass. So I'm gonna have to go back and edit that. But what if I also just want to add a question on the fly? I see my questions, I just want to do on the fly. Then we can go down to new question. I can do my selection. Let's do a true and false. Make sure if you are doing this on the fly that you do put it in the appropriate category. This is your indicator. This is not necessarily the question text that the student would see. So you could put an identifiable code here. They're never going to see it. But usually, especially when you import, it's just the question text. We can identify whether draft or ready, but we can also do that after. Default points, general feedback. This is question feedback. So do I want to give them maybe more information? Like this question is derived from page 27 of your PDF. And this is a true and false, so we have to indicate whether the answer is true or false. Let's just select true. What was my question? It's the sky blue. Okay, it's true. And then you can also add feedback at the choice level. So I can say, you know, if you entered the wrong question, just go ahead and look up. And then if you got it right, maybe I want to say right, but maybe I also just don't want to say anything at all because they know they got it right. And then I'm going to save.
We will be going through how to manually add more questions in our next webinar. So if you're interested in adding those, we will have more detail on how to do that next time as well.
It's a going further, a part 2 of the quiz. So now I can pretty much go back, just change that one setting so it's accurate again. So if we want 80%, that is 8. And then I go back to grade to pass. And this happens a lot. Once I see a quiz, maybe I'm not really liking how it plays out and I want to add some additional questions. So you may have to go back and adjust grade to pass in your description if you mention a grade. Hey, here is my quiz. And it tells me it is not available until the participant satisfies this requirement that session 1 is marked complete. Now I have a quiz that has already been taken by someone. So I'm going to click session 1 quiz. And you can see here, attempts. There's 1 attempt. And I could also, because I previewed this earlier, I could continue my last preview, but attempts, this is, someone has taken your quiz. So I'm going to click attempts and I'm going to see how they did. I'm going to go down. It was my very popular test student. And I can see the grade is 2.5 out of 5. So I'm going to review their attempt. I also see some flags here. So they're trying to get my attention. And sometimes this panel is closed by default, but feel free to open it. It just kind of gives you that quiz navigation. You can see here who it is, and remember from maybe one of our previous sessions, if you see a name for a person that you can drill down into more details about that user, that's why the name is hyperlinked. Usually pulls up their Moodle profile or a way to look at their logs. I can see when they finished, started, duration, how much time they spent. The student just pretty much winged it, and they got 2.5 out of 5. So I can look at what they flagged. So number 2, they probably flagged this one because they got partial credit and they don't know what they missed. But they also flagged number 3 and they got that one right. I'm not sure why. Maybe they saw something. So you can click over here or just scroll and you can see, review it, go, well, you didn't select one of the correct answers. So I can then make a comment to them back and say, I saw your flag. You didn't get one of the questions correct, and this is why. I can maybe explain it a little bit in more detail. And this is why you got the 0.5 points. Was there something else that you wanted to make a comment on the question? And then you would click save. And then they would be alerted, and how they're alerted is through alerts. However, they set up their notifications, those preferences, so they could get an email, but they will definitely get a notification in Moodle itself. And the same would be for that. So once you've done it, you could remove the flag or you could keep it there just so you know, for your own records. That way you know which questions, and maybe you make a list. So if all the students are flagging the same question, maybe there's something wrong with that question. So it's another way to check the performance of your questions. You can also edit a question directly from here. So you can say, oh, that should say date plate instead of data. Then we can go directly here and click edit. And then maybe the correct answer was something else and I indicated wrong. So I can click none and then change my correct answer. Save. Now I changed the correct answer. So keep that in mind. And then you can go through, you can make comments and override points. Let's say on question 4, you're like, yeah, I'll accept engine model number. You can override the point. So even if they got it wrong, and this is often done for those short answer type of questions and essay, the longer ones, and say, I'll take it. Now it will indicate that he got that question right, or the test taker. And when you're done, click finish review to return back, locating 2 spots. And now I chose a different correct answer for something. Now I want to regrade all of those attempts for all those students who maybe actually selected the right answer and I graded them wrong. I'm going to go back to results and regrade all. And it will automatically grade it. Don't go in every single attempt and manually do it. Let the system do it. Edit the question, select the right choice, and then come back to results and click regrade all. You can download this into a CSV format. And you also have some results or some choices here. Maybe you want to just see everyone who has taken the quiz, or maybe who have not taken the quiz. Maybe you want to reach out to those students and say, why haven't you taken the quiz? Also, please note, I find this responses one really helpful, especially if I'm trying to look at incorrect answers, because it just gives you a different view here. You can see, and it's more helpful if you have a lot of students, and then you can kind of see, oh, in one shot, oh, everyone's choosing engine model number, and another way to check the performance of your questions. So if test student here only had the one attempt at this quiz, but I wanted to give them another attempt, this is one way I could do it. I can select their name and then delete their attempt totally. I wouldn't do it that way. I would do an override, and an override overrides your number of attempts to give them a new attempt. That way you have that historical data, because if maybe another instructor is filling in and they fail it again, then they might go to a different instructor and try to get a third attempt. So I do like to see kind of that history and who I'm giving second chances to. Okay, that's your basic quiz. And we are going to quickly just jump in as the student. And I'm going to show you to take the quiz, how to flag. And then we'll do final questions. And then come back in 2 weeks. We're going to dig deeper into these quizzes, the performance, the different question types. We're going to give you more examples of how to use the different question types, and especially some things to look out for. So I already did quiz 1, so I'm going to pop over to quiz 2. And this is the student experience. So I do know it's 8 out of 10, and what my grading method is. I don't see a number of attempts, so that tells me I have unlimited attempts. So I'm going to attempt this quiz. And you can see here I have the ability to flag. So this is how the student will flag a question. They just click it. And then they can also, if they're mistaken, remove that flag. And I'm going to quickly select things. Here is one of those question types that you would not use the Aiken format. For this one, it has images. I probably, for this one, just enter it directly into the site. And now the student, before they submit, they can also see everything that they flagged, again, from that right panel. And they can see, again, they flagged some questions. And these are clickable, so they could actually return, or they can click here to return to the attempt. Submit all and finish. This is just for overly excited clickers, or we don't want to submit something that they aren't absolutely sure, especially if it's at a 1 attempt exam. That's why it's asking them again. So I really did not score well on this one. But here, as the user, because of the different feedback that was identified by my instructor in those quiz settings, I can see what the correct answers are. So all of these were the correct answer. I just didn't click the other one that was required. So that's why I got 75. So this is my points versus max. So those are those 2 other settings that we indicated in the feedback area. And then here, I got this one completely wrong. So it's not going to tell me because correct answer was not selected in this particular quiz. So that's why I don't see the green check. And then here I did, but again, this was only partial credit. So I am told what I got correct, but I'm not given further additional answers. And I wouldn't, if it is unlimited attempts, I wouldn't tell them the right answer. I want them to keep going, because they could screenshot this, especially if it's the same 7 questions and it's not a larger pool, and they could just screenshot it and then just refer to the screenshot or take a picture with their phone. Okay. All right. You can also submit any questions to support, and to access support, click support here. You can also click the support widget, which just brings up the form to quickly send us something, or support@ioentf.training. Okay, great. I really appreciate your time.
All right. Then that concludes our 4th webinar series. Thank you all. Bye, everyone.